Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. We have 2 weeks until Election Day here in the United States. And no, actually, we are literally just exactly 14 days away until Election Day. I'm recording this on a Tuesday. So for these final 2 weeks, coming up to the election, I decided to make a series of videos related to the 2024 presidential election between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris that are bi-weekly. I don't know how many parts it's gonna last. It's probably gonna be like 4 videos leading up to the election. Because there's so little time to make these kinds of videos. The format I think should be one video on Wednesday and then another video on Saturday. I think that would be a good format. Do a midweek update to a weekend update should be a perfect format for videos like these. Because, a lot can change in these 2 weeks coming up to the election. So for these next 2 weeks, we're going to be making these videos about the elections. We're going to be discussing polls and analyzing the election and what is to come. Basically explaining and making predictions and telling everybody what it means and how this will affect what will be happening in the next 2 weeks. Of course, at least as of right now, you're still seeing the same usual background gameplay that I do with every commentary video that I make. However, for the first time in this channel's history, this will be the first time that I am officially breaking this trend, because I'm going to be doing screen sharing while I'm doing this, unedited, or at least partially edited, because we're going to be taking a look at predictions, we're going to be taking a look at polling sites, prediction sites, tweets and posts from X, aka Twitter, showing off especially the battleground states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia, the whole 9 yards, and everything else. And that's going to require me showing off my full screen rather than doing the whole, Leafy is here thing and just showing gameplay in the background for video retention. So in this series, it's gonna be a little bit different. Unfortunately, I'm still not doing the face cam. I know some of you were still hoping for a face reveal. Not like that, I've already revealed it a few times already sporadically, at least in other videos where I have to show off my face. But anyways, without further ado, screen sharing engaging in 3, 2, 1. Now, normally, I would snap my fingers to transition from gameplay to screen share, but unfortunately, at the moment, my hands are sweaty, and as you can see, even if I try to snap, I really can't because of the moisture on my hand due to my clamminess and sweatiness. So yeah, no snap, unfortunately, but right now, you are seeing my screen, and this is actually a really good website. It's called Real Clear Polling, or Real Clear Politics, RCP. This is a really good aggregator to, average all the polls that we're getting at the moment, at least as of recording. They are a really good aggregator. I will link them down in the description below, but right now we're looking at the national numbers, so this is nationwide, not necessarily state-by-state basis, which we will pay attention to, including the battleground states. We're going to be focusing on, I believe, 3 or 4 today. Well, we're especially going to be looking at Pennsylvania, and we'll take a look at Georgia, we'll take a look at Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin. We're going to take a look at as much as I am able to, knowing the time that I have right now. But in the meantime, let's take a look at what we have on the national level based on the RCP aggregate that we have here. Now, the numbers will vary depending on which the pollster leans. Like, for instance, Morning Consult over here, they lean left and they have Harris up by 4. And then we have another one right here, Rasmussen. They lean right. They have Trump up by 1. You also have to take margin of error in consideration, especially with the swing states and the battlegrounds that we will be analyzing later on, as mentioned earlier. So don't be surprised if you end up seeing, push polling from here and there. But even with push polling, it seems like a lot of what we've been seeing is very close. I don't think the average has Harris or Trump above by at least 1 point. We got the national polls here, and we'll move on to the graph right here, and this is a really good indicator of, this is what I use to analyze polls. I always take a look at this, and let's go and take a look at, before this whole thing started. This goes back to 2023, and, this is where the debate happens, I think around June, and we all remember the train wreck that was. So around here, and you can see for most of the time, due to Biden's unpopularity, Trump led in a lot of these polls. So, like, you know, the RCP aggregate over here, he has him at like 46, 47, sometimes, 47, 43, 44, 48. It's a pretty wide margin, and it does look wide, especially on this graph. And then you move on to July, boom, assassination attempt happens, Trump soars. And I think this is like where it like peaks, right around here. Biden drops out, Harris takes over, and you can see how razor thin this race is. Now, if you take a look closely, like let's see, 2 years around here, I think this is a better indicator. That's what I had originally. You can see, Harris has a slight lead. Trump also has a slight lead. It might look pretty big if you look at this graph, but in actuality, it is very close. Again, Harris is barely up by a point in this average that we have right over here. And Trump is slowly starting to catch up. It's been going up, going down, and while I was rehearsing this, it was going up and down multiple times. We're going to be taking a look at Polymarket, as you can see right here. There's also a bunch of other things right here. I got a bunch of X posts over here. I got 538. I got everything here. So bringing out the big guns and trying to give you all the information that I can get from here. So that's the national average, but I want to focus solely on some battleground states, especially Pennsylvania now, which is a must-win for both candidates. Now we got, Trump is leading by 3. The average is 0.8 at the moment. There's also Harris leading by 3, Harris leading by 1, 2, all that over here. But so far, it's looking fairly favorable for Trump. He's always been, really high, especially with, Kamala's past comments on fracking. I think that might even play a role, too. But for the most part, this arguably is the closest race that we see. Look how damn close this is. 6 months, let's go 3 months. Look how close it has been through and through. They are neck and neck, and in some parts, they're virtually tied. Pennsylvania, really, that's where it comes down to. That's why you see a lot of activity happening in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump went to a McDonald's and started serving fries I believe, in the Pittsburgh area, if I remember correctly. I mean, how can he be somewhere else other than Pittsburgh if he went to a Steelers game? Has to be somewhere around that Western Pennsylvania area. And Harris, on the other hand, also has been doing some campaigning in Pennsylvania. That is one of the biggest states. Again, you have to fucking win this state. It is winner take all, and that definitely will determine who will win nationally. Pennsylvania is what Florida used to be. I remember 12 years ago, Florida has always been that one state that is a must win, and it definitely will influence you winning nationally because we don't do it by popular vote. We do it by electoral college. That's obviously what we have. Some people like it. Some people hate it. I'm not going to give my opinion on it. That's up to you to decide. But Pennsylvania is the new Florida. Florida was that one swing state. Nowadays, it's kind of leaning more and more red, so it's kind of a little bit unnecessary now, especially when we have other swing states, which we will discuss. But Pennsylvania is like Florida. Others will say it's like Ohio. Ohio's another one of those swing states that you have to win that will determine the election. Wherever Ohio goes is where the national goes. That has been a trend for quite some time now until 2020 where the trend officially broke. That's no longer the case. But yeah, Pennsylvania, that's definitely a state that everybody's going to be keeping their eye on. We're definitely going to be monitoring it. It's going to be pretty goddamn close. They just closed registration as of recording yesterday. So I know there are people from Pennsylvania who are watching this video. No matter where you lean, it is pretty important, and not pretty important, actually fucking important for you to vote. This state, the election will come down to this state, at least one of these states. So Pennsylvania, very important. And you know what? I also want to add another thing. I've also noticed that Scott Pressler who was like a Trump-leaning guy. He actually is the one who helped Trump win Pennsylvania in 2016. He's back in Pennsylvania, and he's already doing his own thing. So if Trump ends up winning Pennsylvania this year, I think we already know who's responsible. You gotta thank Scott Pressler for what he does in Pennsylvania for Trump, if he ends up winning Pennsylvania. But, we'll have to wait and see. Now, the next state that I want to talk about is Georgia, because we're seeing some interesting things from the Georgia poll. Now, Georgia, this is a state that Biden won last year. Biden was up by 0.8. I really want to talk about this later on, but I want to focus on the swing states because I want to get those out of the way. And you can see, Trump led by 4 in 2016. Biden led by 0.8, ended up winning a state in a very close margin. But we're seeing something a little bit different. For a swing state that, a lot of Democrats have been campaigning that they're going to win, a lot of people saying that it's going to be a blue state within the next 20, 30 years, but we're seeing something a little bit different. Trump, on average, is leading 2.5, so, he's been leading this state for quite some time now. Hold on, let's see if I can find the max. I think this is the furthest it can go. So, Trump, Biden, he's been leading. This has been, like right over here, it's been flip-flopping a bunch. Harris, Trump, Harris. Right now, she's kind of on the decline. And a lot of people like to point to, like, the black voters. That will play such a major role in winning Georgia, especially around the Atlanta suburbs. Harris, she went on Breakfast Club, I believe. I don't know. She went on one of these podcasts and she's trying to get her voice out to the black voters. Great strategy for her. And, Trump's doing his own thing to get black voters, specifically black men voters who we've been seeing trend more towards the right, especially in recent times with what's been going on. In recent times, we see, especially towards the economy, I noticed that a lot of, black men have not been liking the direction the economy has been going. They're struggling to make ends meet. The divorce rate went up. There's been a lot of issues, and especially a lot of black Americans have not been benefiting with what the current economy is. And who is the current administration in the White House? Who is the current vice president? They're getting a little bit disillusioned, so not necessarily surprised to see the result that we're seeing. Trump is capitalizing on it, and Harris is doing her own thing with the Breakfast Club, trying to appeal to these voters. A lot of them might be single voter issues. I'm not entirely sure of that, but it's been close at some parts. Trump, he's got a little bit of an advantage there. And a lot of the averages, even some left-winging polls, they have him winning by a point. So this might be a little bit good news. And I want you to also take a look at something else, because I did not mention this on my national polling. So I'm going to try to go to Trump versus Harris on the national level. Take a look at this day in history, because this might actually be relevant of what we're looking at. 8 years ago, Hillary Clinton led the national average by 6.1. Trump ended up winning that election. 4 years later, or 4 years ago exactly, Biden led by nearly 8 points, 7.9. Biden won that election. Again, your thoughts on that is up for debate. So, 6.1, 7.9, 0.9. So, if you are a Trump voter, you might be looking at this and be like, wow, this looks pretty good for us. We might actually win this. Well, it can contribute, looking at previous numbers can help of, what you might even see. But you want to also take this into consideration. Polls are not meant to be taken for granted. I've mentioned this before. Look at Pennsylvania. Clinton was up by 6.2 8 years ago. Biden 4.9. Biden won. Clinton was much higher, but Trump still won that state. Biden, much lower than Clinton, still won the state by a razor-thin margin. So you can't really count your chickens before they hatch. And it's the same that we're seeing with Georgia. Trump led by 4 points. He still won that state. Biden led by barely a point, won barely a point. Right now, he's leaving by 2.5, and you also want to keep in mind, those numbers always change. So who's to say that maybe tomorrow we're going to see completely different numbers because, polling numbers change. They seem to fluctuate. Look at this graph. They're fluctuating. So it's not necessarily frozen in time. I've said this multiple times in every single video that I make. Always dynamic, never static. Things are always meant to change. So don't take these numbers into consideration. And I also want to mention Georgia because Dave posted this on X, and he said each candidate share of votes, from Georgia. And this is to no surprise, and this happens pretty much every year. I think this is also 4 years ago, 8 years ago. Election day votes seem to favor Republicans almost all the time. We've seen this trend happen before 2020, 2022, 2018, 2016. Election day votes always favor the Republicans. Mail-in ballots or absentee ballots always favor the Democrats. And we've seen this also happen, especially in 2020. You take a look at the absentee ballots it's favoring. In-person early vote seems to fluctuate depending on which state you're in. And if you take a look at Georgia in 2020, 57% Trump, 50% Biden. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but this year, only 88.6K absentee ballots have been returned. This year, he also mentions 300,000 have been requested. In 2020, 1.5 million absentee ballots returned. So the reason for that, and of course the reason why there was such an influx of mail-in ballots was there's a pandemic going on at that time, so those numbers kind of got a little bit wishy-washy. But 2024, we don't necessarily have a pandemic to worry about, so that number, I am not surprised, is significantly less. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. These are only just estimates. We really won't get the full number or the full tally until maybe around around election day. That's when we get the full results, obviously. So again, this is just rough estimates of what we're getting. Again, Dave says this is obviously good news for Trump. Most votes from Georgia came from mail-in absentee ballots. And the same thing with Arizona. And you're going to see, I have a graph right here. This is Arizona's number. The left, you have 2020. And the right, you have 2024. So this is from Uplit Data. I'll, again, link this in the description below. But you notice a sharp early ballot return in 2020, especially on the Democrat side. 330,000 versus 180. Again, these are estimates, and these are also other methods. Look at that sharp decline. It went down, and it also went down for the Republican side too. But take a look at 2024, and this might actually spell good news for Trump voters as well. 180 versus 214,000 early ballot returns. Again, these are rough estimates, so it doesn't really matter. Again, once election day comes, the election day ballots usually favor the Republicans, so this is more or less a rough indicator. And again, margin of error, so you also have to keep that in mind as well. But this is looking good for Trump in Arizona if you take a look at these numbers. So, sharp decline from 2020 versus 2024. Very interesting stuff that we're getting out of there. And then we take a look at Pennsylvania, and these are all the mail-in and absentee ballot returns. It's not surprising to see, Democrats leading that, obviously. We've seen that time and time again. I don't think we have, at least I don't. I don't think I have, the exact numbers and the exact estimates of early voting that is taking place in Pennsylvania. So I don't necessarily know exactly what that is, but this is really just mail-in and absentee ballots. So nothing in-person early votings, and obviously it's not election day yet, so we don't have those numbers just yet. Pennsylvania is a swing state, so don't take these numbers guarantee. Anything can change from today to tomorrow to even next week. So keep this in mind. It's only Wednesday as of uploading. I don't know when I'm going to upload this. Most likely Wednesday. I'm recording this on a Tuesday. So numbers today as of recording might be different. Tomorrow might be different. Thursday might be different. So this is basically information that I'm getting right now at this very moment. So Pennsylvania for mail-in ballots for Democrats, looking pretty good so far. Again, you also want to keep in mind the Republicans, they're changing their strategy. They're doing early voting as well. They're even taking advantage of mail-in ballots as well. Scott Pressler is out there doing his own thing, trying to get people registered, trying to get more young people involved. So a lot is being involved in this state. So much can change, especially in Pennsylvania. Now, while we're on the topic of Georgia, let's move on to another swing state. And as I was, before I started recording this, I noticed something very interesting in Wisconsin. A virtual tie in most of the polls that we're getting, and Trump is only ahead by 0.4. This is a very close one, and Scott Pressler is also involved in this as well. Now, it's been favoring Harris, once she announced, it's been favoring her fairly well, not less than a point at least. But then October comes, her numbers started to slightly dip. Trump took the average. But most of the polls that we've been seeing have it very close, and if not a virtual tie. Like, this is another major swing state that we should be keeping an eye on. Now, we'll take a look at past polls from today. 8 years ago, Clinton led by 6.5 in the original RCP aggregate. She lost that state. Biden, who was slightly lower than Clinton in 2020, won that state. So again, can't really look at these numbers and use that as an indicator. Take everything you see with a grain of salt. But Wisconsin certainly is an interesting state that I will take a look at. Now, I really don't have that much details into Wisconsin. Obviously, I don't know really what's going on. I don't have absentee numbers. I don't have mail-in numbers. I don't have any of that, at least as of this moment. So if I do, I will maybe link it in a pinned comment. Don't forget to follow me on X. I might send out an update there instead of, actual polling of what we're getting. But Wisconsin, for the most part, has been virtual tie, at least as of today. It's been flip-flopping every now and again. This is another state that we have to keep our eye on, and this can go either way. Trump took a narrow lead there, but who's to say Harris won't retake the lead later, maybe even tomorrow. But yeah, we'll take a look at Wisconsin. That's definitely a state to keep an eye on. But also, there's Arizona, and this is another state that was also on the news, along with Georgia. And right now, Trump is leading by 1.8. Interesting stuff, because 8 years ago, as we see, Clinton led by 1.5. She lost that state. Biden, on the other hand, 4 years later, or 4 years ago, Biden led by 3.2. Biden won by less than a point, just like Georgia. Again, very controversial because of, the whole allegations that is going on with Dominion, 3 a.m. ballot dump, all of that, There's been a lot of controversy surrounding Arizona and Georgia in recent years, especially nowadays. But Clinton and Biden both led this state. Of course, Biden was a much higher margin. He won that state. Clinton was the lower margin, lost that state. We're seeing something slightly different. Trump is leading by 1.8. Originally, past years, Clinton and Biden led that state. One won the state. The other lost that state, but Trump seems to be leading by 1.8. And again, it flip-flopped. There was 1 point where Harris led by barely 2.2. This has been flip-flopping, but Trump, gaining ground. I've noticed that they've been campaigning a lot in that state. There's also been talks of Carrie Lake and her hardline stance on what happened in 2020. That might affect it. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to affect it. Rather, Trump's in the ballot, so people will be enthused, especially the Republicans will be enthused to go out and vote, but I don't think Lake running for Senate will necessarily impact him. If anything, vote splitting does in fact exist in certain states. There are some people who voted for Trump but also voted for Mark Kelly in 2020 because nobody liked Martha McSally. Understandable. So again, take these numbers with a grain of salt. Don't take anything to consideration. Don't take polls for granted. But if you're Trump, if you are the Republicans, you might be liking what you are seeing, especially considering like the past numbers that we see over here. So again, Arizona, another state that we're going to be keeping our eyes on. And finally, I know I want to talk about Michigan since there are some, I also want to touch up on Nevada, but let's talk about North Carolina because, North Carolina, they just got impacted by a pretty bad hurricane. Hurricane Helene and the whole response from FEMA, people are getting a little bit disillusioned about that. This state obviously is in play, and this is a huge swing state. Now, Trump won that state both times considerably. Past elections, Clinton led by almost 3 points. 2016, she lost. Biden led by 1.8, also lost. Trump leading by almost a half a point. But again, there's some polls that have Harris winning it. There's one couple that are a tie. But this is another state that has been flip-flopping. Again, the hurricane might have at least some impact on what the results are. Maybe you can even point climate change as a factor with the whole hurricanes are getting a lot stronger because of climate change that could influence, Puerto Rico. People are going to point at Trump's response to Hurricane Maria, be like, oh yeah, he sent you paper towels. He doesn't care about you. And then not to mention the horrible FEMA response that they got. So hurricane, I don't know if I would call it an October surprise since it happened in September, but we're definitely going to be keeping our eyes on North Carolina. That's going to be a very close one. I also want to talk about Nevada because Real Political Data, very reputable guy, there has been a few turn of events according to him, and there is a lead in early voting in Nevada. Nevada has been in play, and I've always stated this before in pretty much every single election video. Not a matter of if, but when Nevada turns red. It turned red at least in the gubernatorial sense, but usually blue states have Republican governors every now and again, so not necessarily an indicator, but I'll take a look at Nevada. Almost barely by a point leading for Trump. Not a matter of if, but when this will flip red. I won't necessarily be surprised if that state ends up being red. Like, if it flips blue, I wouldn't be surprised. But if it flips red, I certainly wouldn't be surprised. Because this is a state that has been trending rightward for quite some time. In 2016, it trended to the right. In 2018, it trended to the right. In 2020, it even trended to the right. In 2022, it trended to the right. We're seeing such a rightward trend in Nevada. Again, Trump voters will think that this is a good thing. And it certainly is. We're noticing it in real time. We're noticing it in some polls that we've been seeing. We are noticing it in a lot of past elections. There is obviously a rightward trend in Nevada. So heavy campaigning is going to be going on there. Obviously, I think Trump was in Las Vegas at one point, if I remember correctly. But yeah, this is going to be very fascinating to see, the right-wing trend of the right-leaning trend of Nevada. Definitely going to be fascinating for me. Definitely will be analyzing this in future videos. Maybe in the weekend we'll talk about it more. Again, polls, those numbers are expected to change. I'm not going to take today for granted. I'm not going to take tomorrow for granted. Always dynamic, never static. Things are subjected to change. Now, before we move on to the map, I want to touch up on an app that, a lot of people have been talking to me about, and I've been retweeting it a couple times, and that's Polymarket. Now, Polymarket, it's sort of like this, betting app. You can bet on like sports and politics and whatnot. It's, they're predicting on like who is going to win the next election. And I've been seeing a lot of people on the right point fingers at this one app as like an indicator of who is going to win. Kamala Harris, she was at 50-50, Trump 50-50, and then Trump has like this huge increase. Like, it always fluctuates. Like, at one point at its peak, just today alone, it was at like 67 at its peak. Right now, it's at 64 cents, but it seems to fluctuate. And a lot of people on the right are pointing at this as, ooh, this means that Trump is going to win. Not necessarily. Polling market, I could see as being like a little bit of an indicator, like, a prediction. It's sort of like with sports, like who is more favored to win. Vegas is giving you the odds of who's going to win. I wouldn't bet on any presidential candidate with money. I wouldn't do this. It's not advised. I wouldn't gamble on like presidential candidates on who's going to win. That's just my opinion, and it is not advised, to be real. But yeah, a lot of people, and I'm definitely seeing a lot of interesting things. Like, it's very favoring Trump a lot, but I'm looking at this and I really wouldn't advise. I mean, I don't understand why or how Vegas is giving, Trump the odds on this, but we're going to be talking about this in my next video, on my part 2 out of 3 or 4 parts, however many parts I'm going to do this. But we reviewed pretty much all, we're on the topic of Nevada. We pretty much reviewed every single, well, not every single, we didn't talk about Michigan. I might talk about it in another video. But we reviewed some, and there is some background noise going on because it just started pouring. Oh boy, living in Florida. So we reviewed all the battleground states that we were going to talk about, except for Michigan. So based on some of the polls that we've been seeing on how close it is, it's going to come down to the states that I have highlighted in purple. So I just did the math of how many electoral votes each presidential candidate needs to get over 270. Trump, based on his current number right over here, he's under 219. He needs 51 electoral votes. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, needs 44. So I did the math before I was recording this. I did the math, and you're only going to need to win like a few states depending. You can lose a few, but if you win, certain states, it will push you up to that magical number of 270. So let's say, for instance, Trump wins Pennsylvania, but Harris wins the rest of these states. She's already at 300. So even if you do win Pennsylvania, you still cannot just win one. You need to win multiple. So let's say Trump wins Georgia, North Carolina, already at 270. So realistically, you have to win just these 3 states. Like, Trump has to win just these 3 states: Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. And you would be okay with losing Virginia, Nevada, and Arizona. That is enough to get you to 270. Harris, on the other hand, what states does she have to win? Well, obviously, Pennsylvania. Boom, she's already at 245. Let's say she wins Arizona, 256. So, Nevada, 262. Wisconsin, already past 270. She's at 272. So, it doesn't matter if Trump wins these states, she's already won the election. So this goes to show you how important all of these swing states are and why there's so much heavy campaigning that is going on in some of these states. So there's multiple paths to victory. So Trump sweeps the Rust Belt and wins the South. He's already at 295. So that's already a huge margin of victory right there. So you don't have to lose or win Arizona. You don't have to win Nevada. You're already very comfortable there. Harris also has multiple paths to victory, but it really just boils down to whether or not you can win Georgia. Because, well, Pennsylvania especially. Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, in my opinion, I think are the most important states to win. Again, polling is extremely close. These are swing states. They can go either way. So it is imperative for both Trump and Harris to campaign as much as possible in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona. Some of you guys live in these states. This goes to show you how important voting is, especially in your state. So if you live in Pennsylvania, maybe you live in Georgia, maybe you live in Arizona, maybe you live in any of these states that are in purple, go out and vote because it's going to make such a huge difference. So where Harris is currently comfortably in right now, what states does she have to win? Obviously Pennsylvania. Again, as I mentioned before, Pennsylvania. Obviously Arizona and Nevada. So she's already at 262. So she has to win at least one of these states. If you win Michigan, you're good. If you win North Carolina, you're good. Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia. Any of these one states will give you the victory. You will get the W. In Trump's case, he would have to win, obviously, Pennsylvania, obviously sweep the Rust Belt, maybe win Arizona, maybe Georgia. Again, if you sweep all the swing states, you're already at 312. So, swing states, you're going to have to keep your eyes on them. So, what would Trump have to do to get, well, to 270? Again, I mentioned this before. These three right there. Maybe you don't have to win Pennsylvania, and maybe you can win Georgia, North Carolina, well, not Virginia. Sorry. Maybe North Carolina. You pretty much win the South. Let's say you win Michigan and you lose Pennsylvania. Maybe you lose Wisconsin. Maybe you win Arizona. You're already past there. Maybe you lose. Maybe you win Nevada instead. There's just way too many combinations that I can even think of what you need to do to win this election. So yeah, hopefully I tried my best on this. Hopefully there's not that much editing that has to be done here. You know, I definitely did stutter a lot in this video. I definitely, tripped over my words. Definitely had some moments where I froze a little bit, but I tried my best. So, this is my first time. If I end up doing this a lot more, maybe I end up becoming good at it. Maybe I might become a better speaker. And this might end up being a cakewalk for me. So let me know what I did. How did I do? What do I need to improve? Just feel free to give me some tips and ideas in the comment section down below. Anyways, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the little notification bell. Be sure to follow me on all my social medias, links are in the description below. Share this video with your friends, families, boyfriends, girlfriends, enemies, whomever. Definitely helps me out a lot, helps the video grow, and helps grow the channel if you were to share this video with whomever you know. I know this is already my first time doing this. I sounded a little bit rusty. I sounded a little bit nervous, but again, this is my first time, and, as I get better and better with practice, I don't have to stutter, I don't have to talk over myself. The ADHD symptoms don't have to define me, so hopefully I'll do more of this. Hopefully I'll get better over time. And please, let me know. How did I do? I appreciate the feedback that I will get for making this kind of, different style of content. So let me know what you guys think how I did with this. Again, I expected this to be a little bit rusty since this is my first time, but I should be able to get better with this over time the more I do it. So just let me know how I did and let me know what I should also improve on going with this moving forward. But anyways, guys, like, subscribe, ring notifications, and until then, take care, talk soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. You're awesome.